right ahead.
Okay, so the question from, here we go. What does it mean for the magical memory if Crowley's account of reincarnation is just phantasmagoria? If his accounts are not to be trusted, should anyone's?
Well, Crowley himself vacillated on that. His first descriptions, you'll note that in Across the Gulf, he doesn't say that he is the reincarnation of Ankh Khonsu. He describes it as in some manner. He doesn't say that he was the incarnation of Ankh Khonsu. He came to use that terminology later. But as far as the terminology that Crowley used, you have to keep in mind that he did it as a teaching mechanism. Did he believe that he was the incarnation of Ankh Khonsu? No, I don't believe he really did believe it, because his private writings, his private letters, and so on don't indicate that. He knew there was some kind of connection, and there clearly is. But did he, in fact, incarnate in his flesh the spirit of Ankh Khonsu? I don't think he did, and I don't think he thought he did. He didn't quite understand it. Should we trust what Crowley says? No. Who told you to? You're to make up your own mind about things. You are a star in the infinite body of heaven. Think for yourself. Just because Crowley said it, it isn't gospel. I know that sounds heretical, doesn't it? No, it's the way we're taught. Okay? We're not followers in a herd who don't question, who follow along blindly listening to what someone says. Crowley said a lot of wise things, and he said a lot of crap too. So you make up your own mind what you want to believe, what you want to listen to. You have to do that in more than just using your intellect. You have to use your true spirit. You have to use really get in it and look at it, not just intellectually, but prayerfully, and fortified by your own experience. That's the most important thing. And that's the way I do it. And sometimes I'm critical of Crowley, and other times I'm not. But I always respect Crowley, because he was the prophet. But he wasn't perfect. God knows his own life is a witness to that. He disobeyed the admonitions of the Book of the Law, which I think is one of the reasons that his understanding of it in its highest order was somewhat stinted, because he disobeyed the chiefs. They told him explicitly not to change so much as the style of the letter in the Book of the Law. And what did he do? Right up until almost the end of his life, he changed the name of Nuit Hadith by putting an H on it. Nuit Hadith, completely disobedient. He didn't take it seriously. So in that respect, I weigh what he says in the balances, and you have to. And there's some tough questions you're going to run into. Sure, there are. But your main guide is going to be your own heart.
Thank you. Next question. Is there a pre-order for the books?
Say again?
Is there a pre-order for the books?
No, not yet. For the ebooks?
Yes.
I have to ask Gwen about that. We haven't got it ready yet. But
the first one, they'll come out successively. So you'll get 1, 2, and 3. The first one will be done very soon. As soon as it is, it will be available on all the major websites. So we're going through a publishing company. Like, it'll be available on Amazon, probably through Barnes and Noble and Nook and Apple Books, all of those mediums. And of course, we have Facebook. So as soon as I have it out, I'll have everyone send out a notice and just tell your friends, pass it around. And so forth and so on.
We just approved the final proofs yesterday for the first one.
Yeah.
So it'll be converted. It's being converted into, I'm sure, the final EPUB, even as we speak this afternoon, it will be. And so it's just, we're very close from releasing the first one. Book 2 and 3, I've still got some work to do on those books. They're all based on the original slide deck of the lectures, the parables of Thelema that I gave. But these books include a lot more content that that I couldn't lecture about because of time constraints and so on. And these books will contain all of the footnote references to to back up certain quotes and statements. And plus, there's additional material and additional pictures in it. So they're not just a rehash of the lecture, but there's additional material.
Right. Okay, next question. Is there any connection other than the mere lunar attributions between the mythology or legend of Khonsu and the 18th Atu in the Thoth tarot deck?
Say it again.
So is there any connection other than mere lunar attributions between the mythology or legend of Khonsu and the 18th Atu in the tarot deck?
Well, I think that's a pretty superficial correspondence. The actual correspondence runs a whole lot deeper than that. Just the very fact that two things have to share the same name doesn't necessarily mean they share the same attributions. Obviously, there are parallels between the tarot card, the moon, and the lunar gods of anywhere and any time, and the imagery that Crowley chose to put on the tarot card. But to say that there is any kind of direct connection between Khonsu and that tarot card, no. I would say no. It's deeper than that.
Thank you. Next one. Your translation of Stèle certainly seems much more coherent than the current paraphrases in Liber ABBA. So I guess that will change in the future editions if there are any. But how about Liber Reich? The verses based on the Stèle as put in Liber AL by Crowley is now class A. So I guess this will not change, although you now have found a more accurate translation.
Well, some of the verses in the Book of the Law itself were based on poetical paraphrases that Crowley himself made from the translation of the Stèle from the French curators of the museum. And those are poetical, and of course they've been embodied in the text of the Book of the Law, so those can't be changed and won't be changed. As far as whatever's in the text of any of the books that Crowley wrote, no, we won't be changing those because Crowley wrote them. I changed my books. Let him change his, if you don't mind me putting it that way. Now, we did make some change when we edited Liber ABA. We made one big change because I jumped up and down about it, and that was in Crowley's original book. He said Nu'ith and Hadith, and I wouldn't have it because, again, it disobeys the commandment in the Book of the Law not to change as much as the style of the letter. The argument was made, well, it was his book. In that case, I said, I don't care. I don't care. He was wrong. That was wrong. We shouldn't have done it. And why are we going to encourage future generations to continue with this error by propagating something that idiotic? No, we're not going to do it. And so we changed it. But no, we're not going to go back and change anything in Liber Rash or those particular documents. There are documents within the body of AA, for example, that are given to students on private documents that don't reflect those any errors of the past in Egyptology, so to speak. But I really can't discuss that. But in my books, I've translated. I tried to translate as cohesively as possible. I can tell you though that one thing that a lot of people do that the chant Akadawa Tefer Biu Biachifu to Deuteroth on Nudaru is based on Crowley's poetic interpretation of part of the Stèle itself, and it's trying to imitate the Egyptian language, Akadawa, and you can see that if you go look in the original holy books of Thelema in the back where it's broken down, the translation, you can see where he took the actual Egyptian translation. It was given to him at the time and tried to poetically paraphrase it. And the French Egyptologist gave him the word kefu, or which he read it as chefu, and it actually doesn't read that way at all. That was an error on their part. It would read Kadwa Taferbiu Ba'abiu. It wouldn't read Taferbiu. But anyway, that's just an aside. So I don't say Tafer Biachifu.
Okay, thank you.
Students not to say Biachifu.
Thank you. Okay, we have a more complex question, like multi-layer. So I'll start. If Crowley was contacting Egyptian gods, or at least god forces that are somehow connected with the ancient Egyptian gods, why is his poetic translation and non-poetic translation of Stèle so utterly different from a modern translation?
Well, it was originally translated by Egyptologists in 1904. That's why. Our knowledge of Egyptian has gone leaps and bounds from where it was in 1904. I talk about this quite a bit. I mean, Crowley's, he didn't have very much Egyptology. We know that for a fact. And what he did have, he got from E.A. Wallace Budge. And I have incontrovertible evidence that he used the 1898 edition of Budge's Book of the Dead, as well as his 1895 edition of the Papyrus of Ani. I know for a fact he did, and I can prove it. However, Budge's translations of those times was not good at the time, and they're woefully inadequate today. So what you have to remember about personal experience and coming into contact with, let's say, proto-human intelligences. Part of that manifestation process, and I've studied this for a long time and tried to understand it, I think they have to work with the material they have at hand, unless they're just going to manifest into flesh and run a printing press themselves or talk on television, which they don't tend to do. But if an intelligent being, a proto-human intelligence or whatever, speaks through you, they have to use the information, the tools that person has to be able to communicate. And we got plenty of evidence where that took place. For example, in Liber 65, which is a Class A book, it refers to it uses reference to the Egyptian god Seb, god of the earth. Well, we know now, 100 years later, well, we knew in fact at that time, let me correct that Seb was wrong. I mean, it was proven by the German Egyptologists in the late 1800s that the correct reading of that word is Geb, not Seb. But why does Seb appear in 65? If it's a holy book, Class A books, we never say they're perfect. We don't say that. They're not perfect. But what they are is the best representation that is given by an advanced adept at the time. And why we say don't change so much as the style of the letter, because we don't want them getting any worse, right? We don't want to have them corrupted like every other holy text in the world. But we, in AA at least, and I think it's true of OTO too, Frater HB, we never say those are perfect. They're not perfect because they're given to imperfect individuals, right? As advanced as they may be, as advanced as you may be, as advanced as Crowley was, he was not a perfect individual. He was not a god. And so they had to use what they had to communicate. He used what he had to communicate. Now we read the name of the god Seb. We know what it's talking about. I know it's Geb, and I know that's what, at the time, he thought it was Seb. Now, if the god was trying to communicate to you, Marco, and he was trying to communicate to you the image of the earth god of ancient Egypt, he would use what? He would use something that you recognize. He would use a word that you recognize because he's trying to communicate. He's not trying to create a wall. And that's how these funny little things happen. So it's not really anything I'm saying, believe it, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's not sacrilegious. I don't want you to think that. I don't think there's anybody out there that believes any stronger than I do about the sanctity of the Book of the Law, and not to change as much as the style of the letter. And all of the holy books for that matter, because we don't want to see them corrupted. But also, I don't encourage any of my students to look at these things through rosy-colored glasses and think that to have them believe something that's not true, if that makes any sense.
It does very much. Okay, so there's a follow-up, though I think you already answered, but I'll read it anyway. Why did Crowley spell these names wrong or confuse father and mother? Wouldn't Iwas correct these things, or the gods Crowley was in contact with?
Well, across the Gulf, it wasn't dictated by Iwas. One, Iwas didn't have anything to do with across the Gulf. Crowley jerked it out of his own rear end. And because he didn't pay any attention to the translation of the Stèle that was given to him by Georges d'Orsay in the Cairo Museum. He didn't know anything about Egyptology. And like I said, I don't even think he read the translation. So don't judge, Iwas didn't have anything to do with it across the Gulf. The Book of the Law doesn't say that Besson was the mother and that Tanak was the father. In fact, quite the contrary. If you read it, it's clear as a bell. In fact, as I said in my lecture, Crowley knew diddly about Egyptian. And there is absolute evidence in the text of the Book of the Law that Iwas, who dictated the Book of the Law, knew the ancient Egyptian language. And not only not in Middle Egyptian, I'm talking about from the Old Kingdom. He used words, expressions that Crowley did not know the meaning of. In fact, at that time, there were only a handful of people on the whole earth at that time that knew enough of Egyptology to know exactly what he was talking about. Well, I can promise you, Iwas knew what he was talking about. And I wrote in my book talking about Cobbs, if I wanted objective proof, all I would have to do was go to that one word and see what it meant, where it came from. Crowley did not know that. He had no idea of what it meant, but Iwas did, and he was right.
Okay, and the last part of the same question. Why does it seem that Crowley couldn't get real verifiable information from his invocations or the magical memory that could now be verified by much more discoveries in Egyptology? There are typos here. So I assume I read this correctly.
Couldn't tell you. It was Crowley. It was Crowley's previous life, Crowley's brain, Crowley's life. It was maybe because he was occasionally too stoned to tell. I mean, let's be factual about this. Crowley spent a lot of time hiring a guide, so he himself would tell you that doing yogic practices to try to recover past life memories and all that sort of thing never is easy. It's never easy. It's hard, and you try to go about it when you're high as a kite, you're not even going to get anywhere. But in all practicality, such things are difficult at best. And to ask me why Crowley didn't retrieve a past life memory, which was verified by modern Egyptology, I don't know. It had to do with Crowley's practice. But what I can tell you is that the deity who dictated the Book of the Law did exactly that. He used Egyptian terms that didn't come into knowledge until much later. As Egyptology progressed, there was no way Crowley knew what those words meant. I can promise you. Or the reference to, for example, like I talking about Lord of Thebes and all. He didn't know that was a title of Mentu. Didn't have a clue. Iwas did.
Thank you. Next one. In the Book of the Law, chapter 337, it is said Ankafna Khonsu was self-slain. What does this mean? Did Ankafna Khonsu commit suicide?
Certainly not. Certainly not. This is one of the central doctrines of the New Eon. It's taught by AA, the doctrine of the self-slain. I wrote a whole chapter about it, I believe, in my first book. I would advise you to read it. It has nothing to do with Ankafna Khonsu committing suicide. It has to do with the doctrinal, spiritual matter of progress in the new eon from an initiatic point of view. And it's one of the important documents. One of the important documents. And one of the important doctrines, I should say. And those out there who are aspirants of AA, listening to my voice, they'll know what I'm talking about. That would show of hands.
Thank you. Okay, next one. I'll just have to rephrase it to actually make it a question. So, as Thelemites, then, we should never suggest that Class A documents are either inerrant or ineffable. Is that true?
That's true. Like I said, we don't say they're inerrant. We don't say they're ineffable. What we say is that they're certainly above rational criticism. Okay? That they must not be changed so much as the style of a letter, because it's happened to every holy book on the face of the earth up to now. Every one of them. And we don't want it to happen to our books. I don't know how long it'll be, but I got a feeling the human race is going to have to exist on this planet one hell of a long time before somebody presents something that's ineffable and imperfect in every sense. It's completely contrary to the human build. It's spiritual and all otherwise.
Indeed. Okay, one more, or a couple of more, but there one question. If the Stèle didn't exist at the museum when Crowley was on his honeymoon, do you believe his encounter? If it wasn't there, how did Rose identify it and see the number 666?
Well, you didn't listen to my lecture very well, whoever asked that question. I said explicitly that Crowley said it was in the Bullock Museum. It was not in the Bullock Museum, but it was in the Cairo Museum, which was just right around the corner from where they were staying. His memory was bad. His magical record from that time was, if you want to call it that, was sketchy in notes. You can read it yourself in the Confessions. They're scribbly, not very detailed. He didn't pay a lot of attention to it because at the time he thought what Rose was saying was baloney, and he didn't pay any real attention to her. It was labeled 666 in the Bullock Museum originally. That's where the number was assigned. Okay, when the Stèle was transferred to the Cairo Museum, they left that original number on there. I don't know exactly when they took it off, but it used to be on the back. I don't think it's on the back anymore, is it? I haven't seen it. Now I have to look at the picture again. Yeah, but it was labeled 666 in the Bullock Museum, and the Cairo Museum didn't change that number. They assigned a different number to it later, but originally, by the time Crowley saw it, that was the number it had on it. Because both museums were, the two holes at the top. I saw that question. That kind of pertains to what I'm talking about. I did kind of gloss over that part. The two holes at the top were to hang the Stèle in the tomb, probably in the entranceway to the funerary chapel. We don't know that for a fact because it wasn't found in situ, but it would have had some ropes or wires or something that would have been suspended in midair in the funerary chapel that the family would visit after the death. They would bring their sacrifices, and they would go in there and they would pray, and they would pray for the soul of their lost loved one. And that was positioned in such a way that they could walk around it and see the backside as well as the front side. It doesn't mean just because it has two holes in it that it's naturally inscribed on the back. For example, the first wife of his eldest son, Nisser Amen, his wife, who died about the same time Onketon Concert died, her funerary stele also has two holes in it, but it's not inscribed on the back side. We just found that out about, a month ago. We'd been in communication with the Cairo Museum, trying to find out whether it was or was not. I think Matt found that out. Didn't you not, Matt? Weren't you the one that found that?
Yes.
Yeah. We thought it might be because it had the two holes in it, but it wasn't. Inscriptions on the back are very unusual.
I think that's it. If there are
Everybody listening doesn't get confused over our discussion of Class A books and whether they're perfect or imperfect or whatever, because we don't mean to diminish the value of a Class A book. We're just being forthright and honest about what we know. The worst thing we can do as Thelema is to go forward and make claims about our material that cannot be backed up by facts. That is going to be the death knell of a religion that tries to call itself truthful and honest and forward. We have to be able to look at things as they really are and tell the truth. As I said, there's no such thing out there. We don't have a document that's perfect. But the law, I can't claim is perfect. I can claim, however, that what we have in Crowley's handwriting has not changed from the time he wrote it, despite all and the people who got all tore up about us changing Phil to kill. There's so much of that story they don't know. We've known for over 35 years that the word originally was killed. We knew it, but we couldn't prove it. And so we didn't present it to the public because we didn't want to mislead. But when we found proof of it, something that was already taught in the order, I'd known it for 35 years, that it was a fact. We don't go out and say things that can't be justified or proven, okay? And I think it's really important for us as Thelemites to always be straight up and honest and realize what we have and what we don't have. And there's a reason behind us not changing the style of a letter is not because we're afraid of imposing imperfection on perfection, but we're just trying to keep it from degrading from where it already is. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, I think we are done. No more questions as far as okay. Thank you, Dan, for the lecture. Can I ask you, is there, to your knowledge, any system to assign numbers to hieroglyphs?
No. You can't do it because there's, in the base hieroglyphic alphabet, there's about 1,300 of them. Not counting all the weird ones and the variation. No.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Thelemites have a Kabbalah they need to investigate and explore. It's not in hieroglyphs. It's in the Kabbalah that was revealed by Liber Trigrammaton.
Indeed.
Thank
That's it.
you, everyone, for your thanks and all that. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't bore you to death.
No.
Thank you.
No, you did not. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge as always.
Oh, thank you. I enjoy it. And well, so far nobody's throwing rocks at me, so I guess it.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. I will keep you in the loop for future lectures. Everyone who attended today will receive an update once we have another lecture.
And we'll also take, if anybody wants to write to the moderator and say, I'd like to hear a lecture about XYZ. I'm always open to listen to it. Doesn't mean I can do it, but I would certainly take that in consideration.
Just send an email with such a comment to events@thelematalks.com and I will forward them to Dan.
It does take time to write lectures and create PowerPoint. This one took a while.
Yes, it does, but it was worth waiting.
But yeah, thank you. I've been up to my eyeballs in trying to get some books out. So juggling water on both shoulders, as my dad would have said. I got at least 4 books already in the process. So I don't know where to stop and where to end, and where to start over.
Well, thank you all. Have a great day, evening, morning, wherever you are. And we'll be seeing you next time.
Time for lunch. You had dinner yet, Marco?
No, I did not. No, the lecture is recorded, but it will not be shared for the time being. All the lectures have been recorded and we will share them at some point in the future, but not right now. Someone asked about the recording.
Yeah. Well, at some point, that's a possibility of doing,
Yep. Yep.
Like a video book. And although my personal preference would be to go back and re-record some stuff, where I stumble.
We can do that. We can do that. Some of the recordings are not the best.
Cough, sneeze.
Not only that, but some of them did not have that good of a audio sound. So we can do it again. Actually,
Sure.
Yeah, we can. We should do it again. Not good.
It'll be fun. Do.
Sorry.
I see you think of how you think it's the first time I've seen your face, and I don't know when.
Great. Have a great remainder of the day or evening, wherever you are, and we'll be seeing you next time.
Bye, everybody.
3, everyone.
Bye, 93. Thank you so much.